All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our daily Gen AI news briefing. I'm David DeLallo. I'm here with the analysts at GAI Insights, and we are going to do our daily exercise of going through the important news of the day and deciding what is truly important or not. And we are sponsored by Custom GPT. Great company that'll help you get a jump start on creating your GPTs, used by MIT and lots of other big names. We've got a good agenda today. We start with more announcements coming out of the NVIDIA conference. This one will be around their partnership with Siemens around digital twins. We've got the White House putting some money where their mouth is based on the CHIPS Act. We've got Google getting hit with a fine related to using data that they should perhaps not be using that's copyrighted. We'll look at the creation of some models without using copyrighted data. Innovative way of putting models together coming out of some research in Japan. And last, we will take a look at how OpenAI's GPT store, which is kind of the Apple App Store equivalent for GPTs. TechCrunch has taken a look to see what's going on in there and how it is doing. So we will get started with the Siemens article. Take it away, Ankaj.
Thanks, David. So the first one that we have for today is from Siemens, and it comes from the NVIDIA GTS conference that's going on. So basically, Siemens is collaborating with NVIDIA now using NVIDIA's Omniverse Cloud APIs to use the digital twin technology in its manufacturing operations.
Yes, and reminder that Omniverse is what NVIDIA likes to call what others would call the metaverse. Luda, what did you think about this one?
Yes, I was between optional and important and decided that I think important is the right designation for this article, but open to other views. We've spoken about Siemens taking a visible lead in applying AI throughout their processes internally and also opening their product lifecycle management software that has AI embedded in it to its customers. So that they've been very adamant about it and doing well with those relationships. So in this particular case, they're taking it further and allowing people creating complex products to visualize the end result and visualize the combination or engineering maps, if you will, that can be extremely complex. I had a startup in that space a number of years ago, and it's a very complex space, but if you do it right, very useful to the engineers. They've demonstrated here the relationship with HD Hyundai, who are working on a ship that is propelled by ammonia and hydrogen. And this has more than 7 million parts, and it can be really, really important for the developers to see the digital twin of that product. So I think it is important to for the manufacturing and more deep core industries to see that this is happening.
All right. Do we have agreement? Do we have dissent?
Well, I was in the optional camp. We generally, this is an announcement. I don't think there's a product available. I could be talking to important because it is a big space, and this is a real application in sort of a mainstream industry again. So this is just more evidence that this is not just for Silicon Valley types or for high-end symbolic, lawyers and people like that. But this is right in the heart of manufacturing complex devices. So in that sense, it's an excellent example. Another one of these, this is a good one to have in your back pocket when you want to demonstrate that this stuff is quite valuable. The digital twin stuff is quite valuable independent of the generative AI stuff, and that's going to become more and more valuable in terms of simulations and ability to do things in these complex environments without having to build them first.
Right. What swung me into important there is at the end of this article, there's a link when the CEO of the division in Siemens is introducing it, right? Or I think CEO of Siemens. So it's a video that actually shows you a slice of a ship, right, with all the pieces moving, and it's actually pretty impressive. That that I think will be extremely valuable for product designers. So that's, I think, the introduction at the conference.
How's that feel to you, Paul? Can you be convinced on important on this one, or were you heavily in the optional camp?
I don't have a big dog in the fight. It's optional. It's very interesting. It's optional for me right now because it's still over the horizon.
All right. I'm going to put the gavel down at important because I thought Luda made a very good argument. Also, just note that Siemens has been on the cutting edge with digital and AI for a long time. I remember writing about them like early days, doing lots of things. So while this is an announcement at the moment, and maybe there's not a recent generative AI infused digital twin, like I know that they're doing really interesting things, and I expect to hear much more coming out of them. So we'll come down on them.
Yeah, this is generative AI. They're layering a generative AI interface on top of their digital twin infrastructure, so you can just talk to it in natural language. Right. So that's going to be quite powerful.
Yeah. Right, totally. I just meant that they've been doing like lots of things using AI for a very long time around digital twins. So I expect this to be in line with that. Okay, we will go important. What's next, Ankaj?
Okay, the next one is from White House. So White House has now proposed up to $8.5 billion to fund Intel's domestic chip manufacturing.
Yes, I saw her speaking on CNBC very excitedly about this yesterday. Paul, what did you think?
I think everyone understands the importance on this. It's incredibly frustrating to watch Intel announced a while ago that they're delaying their construction in Ohio for 2 years. I assume that's just posturing to get more government money. In general, I'm very skeptical of government handouts driving industry innovation. We have not seen that in solar. I think there's a lot more clever ways to do that in terms of incentives and others. So because I'm so skeptical of it, even though it's such an important issue, I have it as optional, but open to other suggestions.
Yeah, it's optional for me, although I would disagree with you that solar was not heavily funded by the Energy Department if you go back and look at the statistics.
Oh, no, to be clear, I agree it was heavily funded, but Chinese still own the industry. We wasted a lot of money.
No, I don't think we wasted a lot of money. I think it's just hard to compete with the Chinese at scale, and they put more money into it. I think the problem was but that's another story.
For our audience, I think it is optional. It's a huge issue. Unfortunately, it's a small amount. Intel would need to put, I don't know, hundreds of billions to actually take it.
Yeah, that's always the idea. Is they're trying to. The government tries to invest at a 10x multiple. So if they invest 8, they want Intel to invest 80. What they're expecting.
At least. Yeah, so optional for our audience, in my view, but it's a huge issue.
Huge issue. Absolutely a huge issue.
Yeah.
But Tim, you said 10x multiple. You mean in a downside, right? I'm thinking about the big dig here in Boston.
Oh, Paul.
All right.
If it hadn't been for the government, Tesla would not exist.
True.
Hey, I disagree with that.
It's absolutely true. I was there. They gave Tesla $500 million guarantee. Tesla was going bankrupt if they hadn't done that. They would absolutely have gone bankrupt.
Oh yeah, the rescue. Yeah. No,
that counts, doesn't it? They would not exist.
But I think we can discuss it separately.
I'm a capitalist at the end of the day, but I also think we're way too far on one end of the pendulum.
All right,
David, Ankash has got some good points on this in the chat. Did you see that?
I did not.
He mentioned that on a podcast he was listening to that there's some interesting comments that money certainly to date has not been enough to get chip movement back to manufacturing, and that
That's
the
right.
TSMC is wondering if Vietnam and India might be the new growth areas for chips.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is all like an important issue. To see the U.S. get anywhere close to what Taiwan is doing would be amazing. I don't think it's really feasible in the short term, but we'll go optional on this. We know it's obviously really important. It's an important national security issue, frankly, but for the AI leader, this doesn't really swing anything in any direction, because even when this facility actually is built is in question, and it's going to be years away. So we will go optional for now. What do we have next?
Okay. The next comes from Google. So Google has been hit with a $270 million fine in France, as the authorities have uncovered that it has used publishers' data for Gemini.
Tim.
So, David and the Google can't seem to get out of their own way problem. They have, annoyed somebody apparently, and maybe a few people, because they're not happy with them. But to John's many time point made that these folks have so much cash, they just said, okay, we're just going to eat this. It's only 270 million. It's chump change to us, and just make this thing go away and move on. So the complaint, so to me, this is optional, maybe important if you're in Europe because of the implications for copyright. If you're not in Europe, I think it's optional. Interesting read in how the European regulators look at this thing. And this is going to be an important issue in general. So there's a very important issue, which is how do intellectual copyright holders, particularly news media folks, get compensated. And that's what this argument was all about. And it stems from an earlier argument, and they've settled basically for this amount of money.
Yeah. You said important for people in Europe. I mean, it's important for any multinational company that's operating, right? So that could be an argument for important in general, but let's see what others think.
True. And a reminder that the IP rights issues have not been settled.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is I think optional, because this war is going on and this will get settled, but not yet. So I would still put it as optional for now, because we flagged that issue in Europe many, many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wonder if
we have another article about copyright issues and data sources coming out.
Yeah.
I mean, the settlement could move things in a direction or not, right? It depends on what they had to say. I can't remember if it said they had to admit wrongdoing when they settled this or not. But yeah, we're well aware of these issues, still not solved, but interesting to see a case made against someone. And
and it's always hard to tell. Sometimes these are just, you have bad regulatory affairs people who just step on somebody's toes and they decide they're going to take action.
Yeah. And the thing that makes me feel optional about this one too is because the French government and Google have been fighting forever, and this is just kind of like a tack on. I feel like it wasn't like a direct attack at generative AI for copyright. It was kind of like, we are already dinging you for all these other things, and we're kind of like throwing this in the mix. Okay.
Like Google, Tim is right. Google, it's in its own way. So they've been told, watch these issues, and they didn't. So the government was watching, and they came back at them. So they did it to themselves, in my book.
All right, we will go optional on this one. Ankaj, please move us forward.
Okay. Yep. So while Google is training Gemini on copyrighted content, there is this company who has now trained a model on publicly available, not copyrighted content.
All right, what do you think, Luda, about this one?
I think it's actually important, even though it's a teensy step in the right direction. But for our audience, especially the people that is actually a lot that are concerned about copyrights and the like, this is an important step. So what is happening here is the CEO of this company, it's called Fairly Trained, left Stability AI because he was so fed up of how these models are trained with the scraped data. So Fairly Trained is going to be certifying models to be fairly trained on the available data. So the one that they just certified, the first one, is from Chicago entity called 273 Ventures that's focused on the set of legal data, and it's called Kelvin Legal Data Set, I think. And that's why the model is called KL3M. It's small model, but it's curated data of legal documents and the like. And it was surprising. It's only 350 million tokens, so small, but they were surprised of how good it was in answering questions and summarizing documents. So it's a step in the direction of, yes, it can be done, and yes, it can probably reduce hallucinations and things like that. So I think it's an important step, and it's good indication to our audience that this will be happening.
All right. Any other thoughts, Tim, Paul?
Yeah, I think, so here's a simple mythical definition of the entire industry: dog catches car. So I think, these were research organizations that basically said, well, we need a lot of data. So they just took whatever they could get, and it was, crummy. They just took everything. No curation, no idea what they were doing. It turned out it worked so much better than they expected that they ended up with some pretty decent products, and here we are. I literally think that's not a totally inaccurate description of what happened.
Yep.
And this is an example that, if you have really good, clean data, you can get a long ways on a little. But it's fairly expensive and complicated to get that data, as anybody who's worked in data analytics knows. We used to joke that the data analytics projects are 99% cleaning up the data and 1% analytics. And that is the problem here. So the companies like to take advantage of these wide open spaces because it's cheap. They don't have to pay for anything. They don't have to do any data curation. It's kind of crappy data, though, at the end of the day. And I think there will be movement towards these kind of highly curated data sets over time because they're just so much more efficient. And really, they're going to produce better models at the end of the day because they're going to be tuned towards what you're looking for. And the training data is everything in these models.
Yeah.
So to me, I agree, important, because this is a landmark effort that shows you don't need to scrape everything for free and just use everything you can find in order to build a good model.
Yeah, what's happening, Tim, I think I'm totally agreeing with you that the data is everything here, and we know that. But I think we've reviewed a number of efforts where there is a much more efficient way to curate large lakes of unstructured data into more, more reviewable assets, right?
I agree. I think there's going to be a huge bootstrapping effort to use the models to curate the data.
Correct.
Curated data that creates new models.
So these two will come together, I think, this and that, and we will have clean, really cool models. I also like the fact that they focused on the legal data. So for the legal professionals, this can be really cool, right?
Yeah.
On top of, you have your own, and you can plaster RAG right on top of that, and here you have a very reliable source of inference.
Yep.
All right, we will go with important. And I just remember when we reviewed the article that talked about Fairly Trained getting started, because they just got started, this organization, in January of this year, and we kind of were like, okay, let's wait and see what happens here. Is anyone going to take their certification seriously and actually do anything here. So there's movement, right? So good to see, and we will go support it.
There was just one quick comment before you leave this one. That notice that one of the data sets they're using is legal, and I continue to see legal as having an absolute massive freight train of change coming. I've got a blog post that's just half written. I think half the billable rates in corporate America for law firms are going to go down by 50% in 3 years, because it's just stunning what's coming there. And I don't see why there's all this new demand for legal services created when it gets so much cheaper. Subset of what they do.
Will we see even more litigation in the U.S.? Please, no. Right. What's next?
Okay. So the next one is more of a technical paper from Sakana.ai. So they raised a few $1 million, I think, 2-3 weeks back, and now they have come out with a paper highlighting how we can automate new model development.
Yeah, it was very lively for a technical paper. Lots of exclamation points and happiness going on here. It was definitely like a refreshing from some of the research papers that we've read. I mean, maybe it's a Japanese kind of like way of approaching this. The Japanese researchers that worked on this one, so I appreciated that. Tim, what do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting, and this is an inevitable trend. Again, this is yet another kind of way into making models that doesn't involve enormous amounts of computing infrastructure. And evolutionary computing's been around for a long time, and you could argue that LLMs use it because they use a lot of random generation, and then they start here, and then they focus in as they get better results. But there's some critical advantages here. First of all, they're taking advantage of all the open source and starting to combine them. A million, I don't know how many models there are on Hugging Face, but there's hundreds of thousands of models. And most of them are tuned versions of other models. And so they have come up with ways of looking at both the weights and the data flow through the models, and creating sort of random starts that then evolutionarily evolve to what's the best model performance. So, we've talked about routers before that pick the best single model. So this is the next layer, which is, let me take piece parts of open source models that perform the best together for a particular task. And then I'm going to just let the computer sort out the optimization of the best combination of these features. This is just the first step. They just picked one way of doing it, and they got pretty darn good results. So this is important from my perspective, because it keeps in mind that we are in such early days that there could be massive changes in how models are made. We'll see, but it's important to keep an eye on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, Ankash, could you bring up some of the images in this? We also had some nice imagery in this research paper, which I appreciate.
Yeah, that's true. This one particular, yeah, that's
demonstrated some of what they were doing. Anybody else have other thoughts on this one? Oh, Tim, what was your rating? I missed it.
I said important because both of this particular effort showing so much progress with really fairly little effort, and this larger idea that model making is far from settled at this point.
Yeah. So this is a trend, right? And the data cleaning is a trend. So at some point, both will merge, and we will see much more effective models.
So you agree on important?
I agree on important, but it is early days. They are just looking at Japanese, right? So that is important for other countries, because a lot of models are just English. So if you can actually put it in another language and put other components into it that are specific to your domain, that makes it for a very effective way of doing it.
Yes, and I think they combined a model with Japanese language with
Japanese language. They did. Right? So that's an important concept as well.
Yeah, and I think one of our last articles, one of the models was in French. So it's good to see multilingual ones starting to come through.
Yep, the Babel fishes here are just about.
All right. Yeah, the video, the audio, and the regular model. So 3 different models in Japanese, right? And I think they said that they did it in a very short time. So this is incredible.
Yeah, very cool. All right, important. We got one more.
Okay. So the last one is from OpenAI. So OpenAI's chatbot store is filling up with spams.
Okay, I signed this one to myself. Ultimately, I feel like it's optional, but I could be convinced and important. I mean, it's not a surprise that that people all over are putting a ton of different GPTs up in the store. Some of them are borderline illegal because they are emulating real people, or they're claiming that the model can the outputs of the model can steer free of detection from tools that are purported to be able to detect if language is generated by a computer, although there's been lots of studies that show those aren't really that effective anyway. Some of the things in here I felt like TechCrunch reported they are borderline, whereas the article tried to push them into illegal. I'm not quite sure I agree with that. But short story is that it's a bit of a swamp, the GPT store right now. There's no monetization yet. There's a report that people don't really want to put anything valuable in here yet because there's no analytics that they can get back from how people are using it, etc. So uh, who knows what OpenAI is doing in the background on this to improve the experience? We don't know. We know that they're not the most transparent company in the world. So that's where I fell on this one. I don't know how anyone else feels about it.
Yeah, I agree, David. It's optional because I don't think anybody in their sane mind would go and grab a program from there and use it. So it's not ready yet. And remember, it was painted as an agent store and as a model, right, of us having all these specialized agents to do tasks for us. It's not, and it's not even close. So yeah, optional.
Yeah, I agree. It's also, again, if you read between the tea leaves, another indication of how immature OpenAI is. Remember, as a for-profit company, they just haven't been around that long. And I think there's, they have so much on their plate. And so this got a lot of attention, but I don't think they are paying a lot of attention and literally paying a lot of dollars to take care of it because they aren't making any money from it, right? Right now, it's just marketing.
Yeah, right. But if they want to, they should be trying to make it a decent experience.
I agree, but this also, if there's an important element here, it just shows how quickly we get flooded with inappropriate and spamish kind of material. In fact, I saw a remarkable statistic that I don't know if it's true. So, but it said almost 50% of the web is already generated by AI in the last 2 years. So 50% of the content is already generated. And that's in a very short period of time. And I would bet dimes to dollars that most of it is spammy kind of stuff.
And Tim, I go back to Adam's comment a couple of weeks ago where he said content is no longer king, but curation is.
Curation, right. So we're immediately, so GPT already needs a GPT to curate the GPTs.
I'm thinking that OpenAI will have to take this thing down at some point and say, we're now really serious about getting a store for.
Or they'll do like Apple did, and they'll start taking a big cut of any revenues, and then that'll pay for lots of things. But yeah, I think they're going to have to. We'll see. I mean, again, I think they're a somewhat immature company. I respect how much they've gotten done, given where they started from and what a short period of time it's been. But I think they're an adolescent company, and we're seeing the growing pains.
Yeah, besides a lot of these GPTs in there being garbage, like I personally don't. I mean, I don't know how I reflect the general population, but I don't trust downloading or bringing some GPT that somebody created into my environment because I feel like OpenAI is on top of things. Like I don't want someone coming in and starting to like suck all the data out of my chat GPT. I mean, sometimes I have very private conversations with chat GPT.
Are we going to get kicked off in 6 seconds here?
What's that, Tim?
Are you going to get kicked off in 3 seconds?
No, it's actually, it doesn't, but
Okay.
we should wrap up. So Ankaj, if you could just throw that back up there, we'll quickly summarize. We had the Siemens digital twins article as important, White House trying their best, but probably not investing enough, optional, Google optional, they've screwing up left and right, plenty of money to cover this fine. Then we have the trading without using copyrighted material, that's definitely important. The Sakana research using multiple models to create a better model, important. OpenAI's garbage store, optional. And that is a wrap for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you want to sign up for the newsletter that summarizes this conversation,
Did we skip one? Wasn't there an article on proteins and enzymes? I read one.
We had put that as we weren't sure we were going to cover it, and because we
Okay.
had a small crew, I kept that one off the list today.
Okay.
So thank you again, Custom GPT, for sponsoring us, and we will see everybody tomorrow.